go live. Good evening, everybody. We're back. We're here in the Weather Center for your 8 p.m. live discussion on the tropics. We're here in the home weather center, and we're going to talk all things Hurricane Erin. We're going to talk all things what's happening in the tropics right now. And then we're also going to discuss a potential shutdown or a little bit of a break and reset, and then what the peak of the hurricane season is starting to look like, at least from a distance. Obviously, there's a lot of volatility here, so we'll have to wait and see precisely what shakes out. But regardless, we have quite a bit to talk about tonight, so some housekeeping. If you're brand new to the channel and if YouTube pushed this to your search or your homepage recommendation, please kindly consider clicking that subscribe button and joining us here in the Weather Center community as we continue to fast approach the peak of the hurricane season. Let's all give that like button a little nudge right now. Let's all make sure if we're in the chat watching or even after this live discussion has concluded, let's make sure we give that like button a little nudge because we're going to need to get this info out to the masses. There's still a lot of noise out there happening across social media, and we are going to try to alleviate and disperse some of that as best as we can. And right off the rip, happy birthday to Mr. Kevin Rivera out there in Puerto Rico. Happy Tuesday, August 19th to you all, and for me, it is my birthday. God bless you all. Sending that love right back to you, Kevin. I hope you've had a fantastic day. I hope that Erin wasn't too relentless on your area when the banding was coming through over the weekend, and you should have some pretty decent conditions in place now post Hurricane Erin. So before we go any further, I also want to mention to make sure you drop a comment in the comment section down below before or after the conclusion of this live stream. I've got two important user questions that you all provided to me, and I think they were fairly loaded, and I'm going to address them as well here in the stream. But first, without further ado, let's talk Hurricane... Oh boy, why is my stream deck not working? That's never a good sign. I just had something kind of go kerplunk before the live stream started. In typical Weather Center fashion, for some reason, there's always something that happens before a live stream. But this is National Hurricane Center's homepage, and, well, just as I told y'all in yesterday's update, Erin's going to dictate what happens here. And Erin decided it's going to dig its heels in, hold steady, hold the line, as that GIF would say, and it's been hanging out. It's still there. Erin is, for all intents and purposes, Lee 2.0, which is, you know, a mixed bag of different things. A lot of us are very much so tired of reporting on Hurricane Erin. I am amongst those people. I'm ready for Erin to skedaddle and just jump off the edge of the National Hurricane Center's chart. Erin can go bon voyage and disappear into the mist, never to be seen again, at least another 5-6 years from now when the named list recycles, since this one's obviously not going to be retired despite making Category 5 intensity. But that's neither here nor there. We also have this disturbance here, still highlighted for a 10% chance of development over the next 48 hours, which doesn't quite look doable as of today, maybe into tomorrow within the 48-hour range once we get to tomorrow morning and afternoon. That could start to trend upwards, trend in the upward direction, and then still at a 60% shot over the next 7 days. And what this tells me right out of the gate is National Hurricane Center is not confident in this anymore. The GFS is kicking rocks right now. We had a multitude of consistent model runs showing this making a run through the greater Antilles and then possibly sneaking its way up the east or western coast of Florida before some sort of a landfall. The GFS decided, you know what, I was just playing around, we're going to drop that, and it caved to the Euro. And as you can see now, the formation zone even extends right up towards the island of Bermuda, so we're very well possibly looking at another recurving system, all thanks to Hurricane Erin. Erin is also about 50%, if not even 60% of the reason why the basin is probably going to close up its doors for a little while and say out to lunch for at least 2 weeks once we get both of these areas of interest and Invest 99L. I jinxed the living daylights out of that yesterday. If you watched yesterday's update video, the NAS effect, the Nazario effect, was 100% in full swing. I'd mentioned that this AOI was going to take the 99L, left you with a little bit of a YouTube cliffhanger cliffhanger, pre-spooky season. And then they were like, nah, fam, you know what? We're just going to go ahead and do that. However, I will admit, and we'll pull this up here into the brief as well, this looks really healthy. It could very well be a tropical depression even right now, and a lot of us are astonished that it's still only hanging out at a 30% chance of development over the next 2 to 7 days. And to tell you the truth, the 7-day, I wish we could just drop the percentages because we're about to be blasted by a bunch of dry air. Hurricane Erin, as it helps to pump the subtropical ridge over the central Atlantic, is going to reinstigate the occurrence of the good old-fashioned anticyclonic wave breaking. The wave breaking where it just takes a large plume of polar and mid-latitude dry air and pushes it right into the MDR. So AL99 Invest 99L doesn't quite have a fighting chance unless it manages to do something within the next 24 to 48 hours before it is absolutely nuked by dry air. And this feature, without a doubt, you're probably going to see some more noise on it in terms of other, channels and other sources, whether they be official or unofficial, mentioning how this could possibly be impactful. But I'm here to tell you, knocking on hypothetical wood here, that I'm not jinxing us once again. This one here, the orange one, is 99.9% likely to recurve, all thanks to Erin's influence on the pattern. And so, with that being said, we'll just kind of rock through some of the latest info on Hurricane Erin, and then we'll get to some long-range stuff so I don't take up too much of your time. So this is the latest 5 p.m. advisory. We're going to get another one. In fact, we should have just gotten another one right now. There you go. So we have the 8 p.m. advisory here. Max sustained winds in the center are still sitting at 105 miles an hour, slowly trying to pick up progress. Everything out there in the atmosphere is trying to shove this thing and get it moving. It's like the stubborn individual in the line that's not paying attention to the person at the red light looking at their phone and the lights turn green and they're still sitting there. You got to get on the horn. It's not going anywhere. We're starting to see a little bit of that forward progress, though, as we get out of something called the COL, the COL, the neutral point between air masses, that forecast rule of thumb that I broke down earlier at News 6, and I've done that a couple times in other live streams and videos. We're not going to see this reobtain major hurricane status. Well, let me rephrase that. I've already boxed myself into a corner far too many times in the last several weeks, so let's not say we're not. The chances that this re-intensifies into a Category 3 are, they're there, but it's marginal at best. If anything, we reobtain Category 3 intensity, and then bon voyage, we continue to gain latitude and we start to see more wind shear out of the west, a la our mid and upper level jet stream pattern. We get a little more dry air coming off the continental U.S. and it's say goodbye. Let's get it up out of there. But as you can see, we're probably still going to be talking about Erin for the next 5 days. The National Hurricane Center's track and all of our computer models do suggest that we still have another 5 days to spend with Erin. So maybe it'll re-intensify. Maybe we can perhaps grab another major hurricane status out of this so we can maybe inflate the ACE number a little bit more for the month of August, because it doesn't quite look like we're going to have much else to work with after this unless Fernan sneaks out of that middle AOI with a 10 for 60 shot. Here's a couple of the key messages. We'll rapid pace all through this. Let me go ahead and see if, nope, my Stream Deck is still not working. I might have to pull that up behind the scenes. But here's a look at the key messages. I'll take my face out of the way. Erin is expected to produce life-threatening surf and rip currents along the beaches of the Bahamas, which is ongoing right now. Much of the east coast of the United States, we have surf advisories and we have small craft advisories in effect for the eastern Florida peninsula. I can confirm that much for us down here anyways. I haven't looked too much further up the coast outside of what you have there in terms of the peak storm surge forecast on the bottom right-hand graphic. Beachgoers in those areas should follow advice from lifeguards, local authorities, and beach warning flags. Storm surge flooding and tropical storm conditions are expected in the North Carolina Outer Banks, the OBX, beginning late Wednesday or Wednesday night, where tropical storm and storm surge warnings are in effect. The storm surge will be accompanied by large waves leading to significant beach erosion, overwash, making some roads impassable. Tropical storm conditions are also possible in Bermuda on Thursday and Friday, where a watch is now in effect, and interest along the U.S. mid-Atlantic and southern England coastlines should still monitor the progress of Erin's strong wind field, and that's primarily because this system has really started to unravel. That's the first question. One of you guys out there asked me, what dictates a hurricane's size? A number of different things. You typically get smaller hurricanes in the deep tropics or out there across the Atlantic when you don't have a lot of moisture to work with. That's why if you think about it, a lot of our systems so far this hurricane season have been very small, compact. Chantal was one of the bigger ones because it had a fairly good frontal chain that it was attached to, and we still had some offshore flow pumping some moisture into the vortex. But if you think about it, Barry was tiny, Andrea was tiny, very short-lived, Dexter was fairly compact, riding that frontal band as it moved off towards the northeast. Now we have Erin here that actually is starting to get a little bit of supplementation from moisture off the United States and what's left over in the western Atlantic, despite the dry air that managed to work its way in along its northwestern flank. But then on top of that, you also have to think about physics. A faster spinning system is going to pull itself together and make it much smaller, like Category 5 version of Erin, or even Beryl last year, Milton, perfect example last year, Tiny Storm, the natural physics in the Bay of Campeche, the bowl shape of the bay, kept it fairly tiny until it started to get some of the dry air and started to slow down. If you remember, it really started to expand in size because the center of circulation quite literally was slowing down. Not only were the winds coming down and the central pressure was coming up, but it was spinning so fast, and as it starts to slow down, because of that, you lose all that mass and inertia. It spreads out, kind of like a nuclear bomb. It goes off, and then you get the sonic wave that goes out alongside it at the surface. So I hope that answers your question. I hope you're watching right now or you're watching this on rerun so you can get that information for you. You can see the wind field is already expanding on Hurricane Erin. It is going to continue to do so. It might hold steady if we intensify this thing and deepen it a couple millibars over the next 8 to 12 hours. We'll have to wait and see what that does. Here's a quick glance at your peak storm surge forecast. You can see the immediate Cape Hatteras area. We're expecting up to 4 feet of storm could be happening with Hurricane Erin had it been nudged out towards the left even further. This thing's going to be carrying with it a lot of water, and as this thing unravels and pushes that energy away from its center, it really expands its reach. It's more, kind of more or less going to push water and energy back towards your area. So here's a look at Erin on the satellite image. Let me go ahead and switch us over to the weird page angle. There you go, so you can see the full look of it. You can still see some pretty decent amounts of dry air on the left-hand side of it, kind of right in through here. I'm going to try to do as little doodling as possible with my Epic pen, so this way, we're buffering. Oh gosh, not that again. All right, we're back. I'm going to try to do as little doodling as possible with my Epic pen to avoid lagging the thing and having it scribbling all over the place. Now we're starting to get a little nudge in the moisture department from up north and to the south still, where you can see a lot of the thunderstorms are still pulling back in along the southern base of it. But sheesh, this system has had a lot of evolutions go on for a while now. Let me switch you over to the True Color Visible Satellite before I accidentally lag out the page. Or you know what? We're not going to look at the satellite. Or actually, here we go. We'll look at the one on College of DuPage before we accidentally lag out of the live stream. So if you look at the very beginning of the loop, this thing was very ragged. Very, very, very ragged. We had a lot of dry air and northwesterly wind shear chopping this thing down like a forest tree, and as a result, the mid and upper level dry air was enabled to enter the core and really knock this thing down a couple notches. But as soon as everyone started to talk smack about how nasty it was looking, you see that the core convection really fired back up. And it's now trying to re-intensify and regain some of the symmetry. It looks like the south side of it really has not quite wrapped up fully just yet. It looks like we're still waiting for some of these hot towers, these CB towers, to fully consolidate around the low-level circulation, and that's when we may see a little bit of intensification between now and probably tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon. All right, so let's take a look at some model data. I'm going to slow us down here for a second because my OBS says we're struggling and YouTube says that we're struggling, which is crazy. I'm not too sure why. This always happens when we're on a live stream. I don't understand why. Always happens on a live stream. It's very annoying. Pardon the intermittent silence, by the way. Just watching the YouTube stream to because on my end, it looks like we're okay. I can still see the preview working and rocking and rolling. Yeah, so okay, now we're caught up. All right. So no more satellite imagery is what this is telling me. Unfortunately, we can't do any satellite imagery. I wanted to do a little bit of a satellite analysis for you all, but you know what? Erin looked very disheveled the first half of the day today. Then we had some really good CB towers blast off near the low-level center, and we're starting to wrap into the vortex once again. So here's a look at your 18C Euro model, and you can see there goes Erin moving up the eastern seaboard, might still try to wobble a little bit more towards the left before finally fully ejecting out towards the right-hand side, the northeast. Then there goes our next AOI. You can see it struggles to develop until way north of the Leeward Islands. Way north of the Leeward Islands. So we're going to see even less impacts, more than likely, from this as it moves off towards the west and eventually the northwest. And then even then, it's still a question of whether or not this does get its act together in the next 3 or 4 days. You can see the European model does develop a fairly weak but sloppy area of low pressure out there in the mid-levels by about just beyond day 4.5. So I'm not too sure why sound is going in and out. That's weird. I see everything is good on my end right now. We have excellent connection. Excellent connection. So it might be something on your end. Either that or you're just catching up with some of the latency. Because, yeah, on my end, everything looks good right now, thankfully. OBS is running just fine. We're cranking just fine over on YouTube. So you might have hit something weird in between the signal going out to you all. So the European model does, in fact, develop our system. It is fully caved to the AI model, so the AI model is kind of gaining some credence once again. The AI model was very adamant that this thing was going to recurve just after 60 west at about 63, 64 west longitude, just to the immediate south of Bermuda, and possibly miss Bermuda well to the east, as a matter of fact. So, yeah, I'm not too sure. Not too sure. This thing definitely is going to get sucked up by Hurricane Erin, though. It's going to say bon voyage to all of us. Not going to pose any credible threat to any landmass at this point. Again, though, naturally, it still is a little far away, so I don't want to go jinxing myself into a corner and saying something that's going to end up, crushing us in the backside of this. Here is a look at the Euro AI model, and you can see the AI model is steadfast and showing it curving, pretty much running parallel to the 60-degree west longitude line there. Once we get to about day 4 and 5, it does develop, gets entrained in the west side of our upper-level ridge that does build up. That's that negative NAO system that does transition over in the Atlantic side of things as we go to a positive Pacific North American oscillation because of the deep trough being tugged off the eastern United States. Yeah, YouTube is being silly. I might have to check YouTube in of itself because YouTube is the one that's being funky. My OBS is doing just fine. I might have to go into my YouTube settings after this and figure it out. So after that, this is where things get a little interesting because there is one last shot of a Hail Mary is what I'm calling it by 99L. It manages to dig further south into the intertropical convergence zone, move through the Windward Islands as just a rainmaker, kind of scrape against the upper periphery of not only the ABC Islands, the southern Lesser Antilles, but northern Venezuela, and then possibly tries to make a run at a tropical storm, if not even a low-end hurricane in the Bay of Campeche. I noticed that the AI model decided to crank this thing up alongside the GFS. So, I'm not an avid proponent of the GFS, but one thing's for certain is it does have its winds long range, and the Euro is also kind of showing the same thing, at least the AI model. When you switch over to your Euro ensembles, the EPS from 12Z today, the EPS, they don't really show too much in terms of what could possibly happen with either one of our waves. Uh-oh, here we go. I think we're going to lag the system again. There we go. It's finally catching up with it. I also have a ton of tabs open, so you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start closing tabs back behind this as well, just to clear up some space. We've already seen that. We've already seen that. There's our Euro ensembles. There we go. Hopefully clear out some of this congestion. So the the Euro ensembles really don't have a healthy signal anymore for that area of interest highlighted at 10 for 60 over the next 7 days. The signal just continues to decrease too, as a matter of fact. It's getting smaller and smaller, and because it stays weak, there are actually a few more ensemble members as of earlier this afternoon that do take it back towards the west. Now again, That's an area of low pressure. It's not a named storm, and these individual ensemble members are not aggressive, let alone organized enough or pronounced enough to suggest we're going to have a westward-moving tropical cyclone. No, if this thing does develop, it will be picked up by the wake of Hurricane Erin, and we still have such a bizarre speed differentiation here, speed spread in Hurricane Erin's members. Look at this. About 126 hours by day 5, it could either be pushing towards Iceland, southern Greenland, headed towards the United Kingdom, or still kicking it off the Nova Scotia, Atlantic Canada coastline. It is wild. And it's a little frustrating, to tell you the truth. That's how much this thing is potentially going to dork up the rest of August. So I'm telling you right now, after these last couple little things or whispers of storms go out and we finally boot Erin off the AOI or the AOR, August is shut down. The AI ensembles, on the other hand, for 12 Zulu, and I'll go ahead and refresh this page and see if we have our 18Z ensembles in. Let me close the tab behind us so this way I don't bog anything down. So we do have 18Z ensembles. So we're starting to see a much greater tightening in our ensemble members for Hurricane Erin off the mid-Atlantic coast. Still a little close for comfort, though. So the impacts we see, and that's the title of the live stream. I think I saw one or two folks mentioning earlier that the title was a little misleading. Now, remember, I'm not saying landfall. I'm saying impacts. We're describing Hurricane Erin's impacts. And we're going to see quite a decent amount of coastal impacts, and just, I would say the immediate inland areas will likely see some pretty hefty impacts as well, especially if we continue to see a little bit of shimmying back towards the left ever so slightly. We're not seeing a landfall out there, but as the system expands and continues to unravel, and then eventually, by this point, by about hour 60 to 72, day 3-ish, we're going to begin the extratropical transition, and that's also going to spread everything out even more so. So up in the northeast near Long Island, Manhattan, Maine, Atlantic Canada, the Nova Scotia area, Bay up there near the Bay of Fundy, we could also get some impacts from this as it continues to broaden out, as it undergoes a bit of a change in its overall integrity thanks to the jet stream up there. Then you can see the AI model fervent that this thing is going to recurve somewhere around Bermuda, either between 60 or 70 west, and not be a harm or anything to anybody at all. It's going to continue to follow in hot pursuit of Hurricane Erin as it gets caught up in our upper level pattern on the north side of the Atlantic and the upper mid latitudes and the poles. And then as you go a little further through time, I want you in the Gulf here. Let's see what the 18Z has for us. I have not looked at this, so this will be my first glance alongside with you. And I just want to see what happens near the Yucatan Channel, the Yucatan Peninsula, and especially the Bay of Campeche, if I can get these ensembles to cooperate for once. There we go. So yeah, we're starting to see a little bit more of a percolating of the signal. In fact, now we've got a little bit more of a spread, too. We've got some members near to the state of Florida on the east side, out in the Atlantic, but especially into the Gulf as we get ready to round out the month of August and head into September. So, not something I'm really concerned about, not something I'm really going to be, let me not tell a white lie. I am going to be paying attention to it, obviously, but I'm not going to be worried too much about, what this thing does over the next 3 to 5 days. We got to get it through the MDR, get it through the dry air, and then also get it back towards the Western Caribbean before it does anything. Or it could possibly, like the 12Z Euro operational model showed today, could even wander across the basin into the Eastern Pacific as they get ready to get going again. So that kind of leads me right into the backside of this discussion. So these are your GFS ensembles. I'm going to skip right over it. We're just going to talk about what Erin's going to do to the pattern. So this is our latest GFS, 18 Zulu. And as Erin continues to move up towards the northeast, look at how much it's going to invigorate the pattern. Look at all these upper-level winds just streaming out of it. That's what you call pumping the ridge. You've got your own localized environment on the north and east side of the system, tapping into your polar front jet up over the mid-latitudes, especially given that it's trying to trough down with that, quote, outlandishly fall-like front that everybody's talking about on the interwebs right now. But as a result, if you watch as we fast forward beyond day 4, Look at that nice PV streamer, that positive vorticity streamer that develops on the east side of the basin right down into the MDR, which is unfortunately going to increase our wind shear, and it's also going to dump a frivolous amount of dry air down there. And then you can see we have some upper-low appendages that really break off and start to meander through the subtropical Atlantic as well. You can see it even more clearly when we switch over to our 700 millibar to 400 millibar relative humidity, the moisture in the atmosphere. As Erin moves towards the northeast, look what happens. Look at all that dry air. It not only pulls off the mid-Atlantic and the northeast, helping to scoot this mid-latitude cyclone's cold front along, it's going to pull that off, and then it's also going to bring down cooler, drier polar air from up north, and then here we go. Here comes that wave break. Bam, crashes down. Swoops right into the MDR, and then don't look now. There goes 99L doing that Hail Mary maneuver, moving across the Yucatan Peninsula, portions of Belize, and then it tries to do something into the Bay of Campeche. The Bay of Campeche, the Western Caribbean, are going to be an interesting hotspot as we go through the first 7 to 10 days of September. I'm really starting to get the vibe that we are going to see a twin scenario once again, just like we did last hurricane season. Now, obviously, the background state of the atmosphere is very different than we saw last year and even 2023. So it's going to take a little more of a nudge to get things off the ground, but two things. Number one, we have a pretty pronounced signal that the gyre is making a return as we move into the first week of September, possibly extended out into the second week of September. Gonna give it a second because YouTube is flagging me once again for possible lag, and it's kind of frustrating. There we go, okay. Looks like we're good. And the reason I say that, and the reason I'm confident in that, is because the GFS doesn't start popping phantom storms unless the gyre's coming back around. I know that sounds like a very silly rule of thumb. There's other pieces of the equation I'm going to show you, other variables to the algebraic equation here, but if there's one thing I can guarantee you all is the GFS is not going to pop out phantom hurricanes unless the gyre is getting ready to make another appearance. And if you fast forward towards the end of the run, as you scoot out 99L, notice how we immediately start to see a rapid buildup of our moisture down there across Central America, the easternmost Pacific, and the Western Caribbean. If I go back to 12Z, if it'll load, this is where it becomes a struggle. There you go. We have storm after storm that starts to percolate in the Bay of Campeche. You get 99L that develops at the last second, scoots off towards the west, and then we get another area of low pressure rapidly beginning to build in that same exact spot as our moisture more or less goes through the roof. Now, one last little touching point about the background pattern. If you look, when we go to the very beginning, you're starting to see the MJO taper off. We're moving into phases 4, 5, and 6, starting to favor the maritime continents and start to really tick upwards in the favorability category for the Central and Eastern Pacific again, so they're probably going to get going here very soon. We'll probably get some new AOIs, another named storm or two, if not three, on that side of the spectrum before we creep back into the Atlantic. But you can see, in terms of our base state atmosphere, we're going to go right back into sinking, right back into high pressure and subsidence out there. And we're going to be cooked more or less from the end of August. Watch the timestamp here. These are your weekly Euro your weekly Euro anomalies. Almost gave you guys a anomaly sandwich there. You can see from the 30th through the 6th, this is your general average. And then right as we turn the page and get just beyond Labor Day, notice how our background pressures begin to lift up. We start to slowly make the transition to lower pressure by about September 9th through the 16th, and in the middle portions of the month, we're back as we start to see more of that favorable upper-level environment come across. Did the stream lag out? Because we've got a lot of folks in the chat, but I don't see anyone talking right now. That kind of has me a little concerned. Just a little bit concerned. I don't think no one is saying absolutely anything right now. So if you're in the chat and you can hear me okay, please say something or put something in the comments. I might have to close and reopen the chat, to tell you the truth. It's very bizarre. This is not enjoying live streams as much anymore. So spoiler alert, as you can see here, we've got Our Euro weeklies, in terms of our subseasonal long-range forecast, they're going to tick back up as soon as we get just beyond September 1st. You can see the basin really quiets down as we make the transition. Oh, there we go. Now I can see you all. Okay, perfect. Sorry. I guess you all were just listening closely. That's awesome. Hey, good all right, awesome. That's perfect. Alrighty, excellent. So you can see between the 1st and about the 7th of September, we're going to close up shop for just a little while. There goes that Eastern Pacific signal. But then as soon as we transition back from the 8th to the 15th, my pinpointed dates are probably going to be between the 7th and the 12th. That's when we'll slowly come to that very light simmer. And then we'll move to a boil after that. If you look at September 8th to the 15th, we really start to see those anomalies nudge in the positive direction. And then by the 15th, you're seeing two signals there. Those are those twin signals I'd mentioned to you. You can see here to the left-hand side off the Bay of Campeche, up through the Gulf. That is what we want to watch, to tell you the truth. Anything that comes off the Cabo Verde Islands, especially as we oscillate back and forth between a negative and positive NAO, we're going back to a positive NAO once this MJO pulse really works its way further towards the east. And so as a result, we're going to see an easier way for these tropical waves out there to pop off towards the north and probably either pull more Erin maneuvers or even escape earlier than that. Obviously, there's some intra-seasonal variability. There's some intra-storm variability. We'll have to wait and see what the pattern looks like. But just from a far-away glance, from what I can see, systems down there out in the deep tropics are going to have an easier time escaping towards the north if they start to develop in the MDR. I personally really do feel like we're going to have to watch close to home again. That is where most of our hot water is still loaded up. And you can see here, I really didn't touch on this too much during my last couple of updates since we're approaching the peak season, but this was the latest seasonal forecast from the Euro predicting 130% of our normal seasonal ACE as we go towards the second half of the hurricane season. So put that into perspective. Hashtag backloaded, here we come once again. Because earlier on when we had June, July, August, September, October, November, the full spectrum of the 6-month hurricane season, we were sitting at about average, if not slightly above average ACE for the whole season. Remember that. It's taking June through November and putting the percentage out there. Now we're only taking September, October, November and showing us that we're going to be at 130% of the average ACE we typically get in those 3 months. So it looks a little sporty out there. Here's our latest long-range velocity anomaly potential, and you can see large-scale subsidence and good old sinking air really settles in right after the 21st here in a couple days, and then by the 26th of August, we are cooked out there. Erin is really going to dump some dry air in, and it's Jover for a little while. But then once we get past Labor Day, you can see things starting to lighten up a little bit. And then from there, we start to see an increase in our overall favorability from about the 12th, if not maybe the 15th, the middle portion of the month, and then we're off, we're cranking. You can see the same thing here when you look at your velocity anomaly from that three-dimensional top-down look. As you fast forward through time, we have large-scale sinking focused across our side of the hemisphere, both north and south. And then finally, once we move beyond the 6th to the 7th of September, you'll notice that these shades of brown, whenever my internet catches up with us, good Lord. Good Lord. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that's Samuel Lewis Reed, GBF. We did talk about 2004. This will be very 2004-esque, to tell you the truth. It'll also be very 2024-esque. Because I looked back at the numbers, and we had Charlie. That was the heavy hitter storm in 2004 in August. That was it. We had Slop Alex, Slop Bonnie, mid-grade tropical storm. And then I forget what the fourth named storm was. I think it was Danielle. And then Earl, both of which very short-lived tropical cyclones. And then as we worked our way through, I sounded like Arnold Schwarzenegger there, as we worked our way through September, that's when things really started to percolate out there. So if this thing would finally catch up, I'm just going to go ahead and fast forward all the way through without crashing my internet. It's not cooperating. There we go. Okay, now we're starting to see... At this point in time, you can start to see those green shades. I keep looking at YouTube and it's distracting me. You start to see the green shades really pick back up across our basin in portions of Africa, especially towards the middle sections of September through to the tail end of the month. The CFS corroborates that as well. If you look towards the midsections of September, here's September 9th, and this is when I do think things can slowly but surely start to rock and roll. We start to see lifting once again focused over Africa, and then there goes that little bit of what could be a whisper of the gyre coming back around. If you look in the eastern Pacific, we have that Kelvin wave anomaly being picked up south of Baja off the east or the west coast of Mexico, creeping into the Gulf, the Bay of Campeche there. And you can see a lot of the large-scale sinking in the upper levels suppressing or have kind of gone away. And at this point in time, from about September 9th, even beyond that, to September 16th, we'll have that favorable setup sitting around. And this is primarily why. So as we continue to try to sneak back towards a weak La Nina on the Pacific side, we've seen some very generous warmth. That's one thing that Erin is more or less contributing to, is it's cranking up the heat where it matters the most. We're upwelling some of the waters, and as you can see here, as of today, or this is yesterday's SST analysis, as it pulls towards the north, we're really going to wash out a lot of those warm anomalies in the western subtropics. Because of that, we're probably going to see a little bit of that fateful nudge in terms of our thermodynamics. There's going to be a little bit of hangover from this, so it probably won't take effect as soon as Erin bounces out. It's going to need a little time. Probably by October, and then maybe even into November, we could get some late season activity because we're going to upwell some of those hot waters off the immediate east coast of the United States where they've absolutely dominated, which means we're going to focus the Caribbean, the Gulf, and the MDR as some of our warmest spots, especially the Caribbean. The Caribbean has really been warming up thanks to the large anticyclone, the westerly winds that have really helped to ramp up Hurricane Erin's intensity. So here's the latest on Climate Prediction Center. I'm glad to see that this was kind of a little bump in the confidence sector. We're lagging again, unfortunately, but as you can see, even from this perspective, Climate Prediction Center, there we go, we're back. Climate Prediction Center is still thinking we have that subtle chance at some tropical development between the 27th and the 2nd of September, and then as we work our way into the first and second week of September, you can see we're highlighting the Western Caribbean and the fateful Bay of Campeche, as well as, and there's that twin signal I was telling you about. And I'm fully on board with that, to tell you the truth. Fully on board with it. I definitely can see signs of the gyre kicking back, and then I can definitely see some of our MDR action, which is it's very peak season. I was going to start comparing previous hurricane seasons, but this is very peak season. Last hurricane season, for example, when we had Helene and Milton rocking off towards our west in Central Florida, we still had Kirk, Joyce, who else? Leslie out there, curving, having fun in the Central Atlantic, not doing anything. So, yeah. And then on top of that, like I said, when you switch over to your GFS, I should have the ensembles up. Here we go. Let me go ahead and see if we have any of the ensembles in for today's run without completely destroying the live stream once again. Hopefully it'll pick back up. Let me close out some more of my tabs since we're done there. Nope, still at 384, so we'll use yesterday's extended range GFS. And I want you to see what happens in the basin once we go beyond September 10th, the classic climatological peak of the hurricane season. Whenever it decides to catch up. How y'all doing? I hope you've had a pleasant first couple days of the week. Probably going to have to adjust the bit rate after this so it doesn't keep jacking up on everybody. We're still waiting for the ensembles to come in. I don't know why it's taking its sweet time. Let me refresh the page. Hopefully I don't crash us out. Let's go back to yesterday's 0Z run, the extended range. There we go. So once Erin gets out of the way, you're going to see our ensemble members across the tropical Atlantic really trend down. They're going to kind of back off. We're going to have that increased higher pressure. We're going to have a lack of MJO forcing. We're going to have a huge dump of dry air. So virtually everything that could go wrong is about to go wrong in the tropics. So for those of you out there who've stuck around or are watching this live stream on replay, if you're going to call hype in the comments, listen very closely to what I'm saying. The Atlantic is about to have everything that could possibly go wrong, minus Saharan dust. May as well throw some dust in there as well. But minus the Saharan dust, everything that could go wrong is about to go wrong. Full-fledged Murphy's Law, all thanks to Hurricane Erin. We still could squeak out Fernan before the end of the month, and you could see, still a little bit of a somewhat bullish signal for that feature as we move towards the end of August. Although, take that with a very hefty grain of salt, because that was the previous rendition of the GFS. Once we go beyond 300 hours, though, outside of that weak glimpse of a Hail Mary down there in the Bay of Campeche a la 99L, notice that the rest of the tropics are quiet. This is 366 hours out to 400 hours. There's nothing out there. You have that one rogue member moving back towards Bermuda. That's also still related to our area of interest that's out there now. But all in all, nothing. Then, as we fast forward past Labor Day, look what starts to happen down in that very, very familiar spot. We suddenly have members all over the place. On the Eastern Pacific side, in the Bay of Campeche, in the Central Gulf, and especially the Western Caribbean. This is September 11th. Big day, obviously, in the history of the United States. This is September 11th. I do think it's going to be a pivotal point in our hurricane season coming up. I just realized I have the weird page. There we go. Let me bring the page over so you all can see full screen. So yeah, right around this, we'll say September 11th. That's a huge day in American history. So we'll just use September 11th as our date landmark, our calendar landmark. And then you fast forward from there, and that's when things get fairly sporty out there. You look at our long-range GFS, and shortly after that, once we rock into the third full week of September, there's stuff everywhere. You've got signals coming out of the MDR. You still have signals trying to pop off in the Caribbean. You have a couple of cruiser signatures as well. So we're going to wait and see. But one thing is for certain. I really do think that the Central American gyre is going to make a return, very similar to when we saw Idalia, 2023 hurricane season, and a mixture of when Helene and Francine kicked off. So in terms of that Lizax recurring cycle, I'm not calling that the case of the MJO here or any kind of circumstantial evidence. Maybe there is. Maybe I can do a little study after this live stream or down the road. But in terms of something that tends to recur, if you think about it, in 2023, we had Idalia at the end of August. We were getting ready for Idalia to form up this time in 2023. Then last hurricane season, right around the same time, we started to see Francine bubbling up in the Bay of Campeche. That ended up making a move towards the New Orleans, the southeast Louisiana area. Shortly after that, we had Hurricane Helene at the back end of September, and then we had Hurricane Milton in the early portions of October. So I definitely do think that's something we have to watch for. That's definitely something big we have to watch for, because now we're to the point in the hurricane season where, since we'll just barely be making the transition to fall, we're not going to have a tremendous amount of wind shear down there. The dry air should still not be too hefty. We have a tremendous amount of hot water, and our OHC is bottled up on the left-hand side of the Caribbean, the Western Caribbean, and much of the Gulf. And especially once Erin is done doing its thing, it's going to take a little while for the subtropical waters off the East Coast to taper or to kind of rebuild their energy. So we're going to start to focus lift down there as well. So any little Kelvin wave, or especially the MJO, is going to set something off. And given the fact that we have the steering patterns in play across the greater Atlantic, it goes without saying that we'll probably end up seeing a tropical storm, or God forbid a hurricane, lift up and hit somebody. And that's not me trying to sound all clicks. No, that's just me being honest. Because we have the pattern in place. We've had the negative PNA that will be slowly transitioning to more of a positive setup. We're going to have the jet stream becoming a little bit more aggressive as we head towards transition season. The writing's on the wall. You can't make that up. So I think it's very interesting what a lot of our long-range models are showing. If you switch over even to the CFS, and I'm not looking at individual storms. Remember, quality rule of thumb to remember is you don't use the CFS for individual storms. You never use the CFS for hurricanes. You use it to look at the background environment. And what I want you to really notice as I take you through the latest 12 Zulu loop of the CFS today, even the CFS, after the end of August, you see just nothing. especially out in the eastern Atlantic. If you notice, there's not really even a hefty precip signal because of our Bermuda Azores high dumping a ton of dry air down there. But as you fast forward the clock and go beyond the early portions of September, right around the 7th there, I do think there could be some latency in early September. I don't quite think we're going to get action immediately moving into September. Still a possibility. We'll have to watch the propagation of our MJO, look at some of the computer models and the dynamical models for that movement or for that feature's movement, and anything that it might spit out, anything CCKW, convectively coupled Kelvin wave related, out ahead of it. Especially when we have all that stuff bubbling up over the Maritimes. That's another real or do trend into cooler territories in the ENSO, because we've got a ton of hot water in the North and especially Western Pacific. And once the MJO comes across, especially since we favored lift in that area, it's going to really bump up our westerly winds from the west side of the Pacific into the central and eastern, which is going to help to cool the ENSO off. And I think that's why we're really trending towards that cooler phase as we get towards the peak of the northern hemisphere hurricane season. But just beyond that, notice that the CFS is already starting to say we become favorable again, and then look at all that moisture buildup and all that stuff possibly headed up towards a familiar spot in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen there. I mean, look at that. That screams gyre. We're at the end of the run, but even if I go halfway back through the run, you can see there's a lot of moisture down there. There's a lot of moisture, and that's a telltale sign. Once you start to see those lowering pressures, a disruption in the overall trade flow, it goes without saying it's going to happen. The lid's going to come off, and then we're back to tracking all sorts of crazy signals. So we'll see. We'll definitely see. Climate Prediction Center is seeing it. Looking at the latest global tropics, they're definitely seeing it as we rock through September, the first portions of September. And then beyond that, we're going to have the MDR start to tick up as well. So that's kind of about it. That's kind of where we'll wrap up. It's kind of where we'll wrap up. And I will leave you all with that. It looks like September is going to be interesting. So we dodged some bullets. We got a little bit of ace for the month of August. August looks to close out very similar to how 2024 did its thing as well, with only one major named storm. Last hurricane season, obviously, we had two mid-grade hurricanes. Debbie was a 1, and Ernesto topped out at a 2. So kind of comparing apples to oranges, the ace we accrued and the values that Debbie and Ernesto provided us in 2024, you could kind of equivalize that with Erin because of the Cat 5 and the longevity it's really spending out there with us. So to tell you the truth, Kevin Rivera, CPC, not all that accurate. I mean, they are, don't get me wrong, climatology perspective. Yes, they look at the variables that we're tracking as well, and I'll bet you 10-1 if I were to pull up their discussion, we'll probably see that as well if I don't crash the live stream, but they'll probably say the exact same thing that I was just mentioning to you all. Let me go to the global tropics hazards before I lag out of the live stream again. I can already see YouTube's getting mad at me, yelling at me again, but here you go. So between the 27th and the 9th, an active MJO continues. Let me take my face out of the way and pull this over. There you go, so you all can see with me. With the enhanced convective phase crossing the eastern Indian Ocean upper level velocity potential anomalies, exhibit a characteristic wave 1 structure with broad-scale enhanced divergence centered over the eastern Indian Ocean and maritime continent. So they're already mentioning there that we're starting to see a favoring closer towards the Indian Ocean and then even towards the Western Pacific, which is why we already have some areas of interest, and I think a couple invests out there as well. Now, if you look down towards the bottom here, let me go, where's my cursor? You can see here, additional easterly waves are forecast to emerge over the basin from Africa towards the end of week 2. A 20% chance of formation is blah, say blah, blah, blah. And then during week 3, more favorable conditions are anticipated to develop across the basin, and a broader region for potential formation is indicated. Dynamical models indicate a potential for formation across the Western Caribbean or Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America. Don't come after me. They say Gulf of you-know-what in there. During week 3 as well, with low-level westerly winds favored to build across the region. We'll have to watch that. That's a nice little feedback tip right there. So we'll have to watch for those westerly winds to build up as the gyre begins to key. Westerly winds means that the gyre is probably going to make a return because, again, that's the disruption in your overall flow. You have your westerlies above the tropics, kind of in the subtropics and the mid-latitudes, and then you have your trade winds, your easterly trade winds. Once you bring those back, you start to create that large-scale anticyclone in the upper levels that ventilates the surface and creates that broad area of low pressure. So, yeah. Get what you can now out of Hurricane Erin. For those of you in the mid-Atlantic, stay safe, stay away from the beaches, definitely cancel plans. We're still kind of at the peak of touristy season before the cold weather starts to settle in at the very tail end of the year. So definitely reconsider hitting the beach over the next 5 days or so until we can finally get Erin up out of there. And then, yeah, there we go. It looks like September is when we'll be right back to working overtime in the weather center, but it does seem like we're going to be on a bit of a hiatus for the next, I wouldn't say the next, I would say after the next 5 days, then we'll go on a bit of a hiatus. That's when we'll go on a hiatus. 8-Bit Bro, you make a very valid point. The gyre caused 3 Gulf systems to hit Florida last year. It better chill this time. To tell you the truth, though, I don't think it will. My gut, and why I've jinxed these previous systems, my gut has been telling me since January, February, and March of this year that October is going to be Florida's time again. But you never know. We might bump that back in time just a little bit, given setting up for the month of September. We'll just have to pay attention and just wait and see. And I agree with you, Natalie Ramos. It's very easy for me to get caught up in saying the old name. I just kind of refrain from saying any names at this point for the sake of not shooting myself in the foot. Austin Moriarty, excellent comment. I do agree. He says, hey, David, you should make a Weather 101 series in the off-season. Maybe like 10-minute episodes teaching people about various weather terminology so that we can follow you better during the season. That'd be fantastic, to tell you the truth. I would love to do that. I'm still tossing around the idea of maybe doing a monthly, if not bi-weekly podcast where I'll do a long-winded episode, might make it a members-only thing or something like that, a very cheap buy-in, just because I want to keep it unadulterated. I want to relax from any kind of professionalism, to tell you the truth. I know that may sound bizarre, but I just want to give you meteorologist David, weatherman David. I don't want to be meteorologist so-and-so out of Central Florida, Orlando. I want to be just weatherman David. And I want to talk to you all as I would talk to friends and, other folks who are close to me, since we're all a close-knit community. So maybe if you're all still watching at this point, drop me a comment in the comment section. Not in the chat because I won't be able to find it, but let me know in the comment section what you all think about that. I'm not asking for tons and tons of people to tune in or to watch, but maybe a couple bucks buy-in. That's why I'm only going to do it like once or twice a month, to where we just do like an hour-long podcast where I just talk to you all, maybe pull up a couple graphics, do some educational spiels, and then just really be bold and honest. I mean, we're talking bold and honest with my thoughts on hurricane season, with hype and all that kind of stuff. So I think that'd be fun. I would have a lot of fun talking weather like that to you all. But yeah, that's about it. September and then October, November, I think the second half of the hurricane season is probably going to throw some curveballs at us. We obviously still have to kind of battle a little bit of the fact that we rapidly bounced back from a fairly cold Atlantic, that hangover, that latency effect. We're not going to just get rid of it because we warmed up a month ago. Think about it. We were cold for January, February, March, April, and in much of May, and then we warmed up in June, July. We got to catch up a little bit. But if we do trend cooler out in the Pacific, that'll only help to increase that thermodynamic instability for the Atlantic, which my gut instinct tells me that we'll just have to keep our heads on a swivel and our eyes open for September and especially October. But that's that. If you guys have any additional questions, please feel free to drop them in the comment section down below upon the conclusion of the live stream. Let me see if there's any questions pending in the chat right now. Can we check the trade winds in the Atlantic that warm the Atlantic? So we really can't, we can take a look real quick as long as I don't lag the page out again. We'll go on here to the GFS on tropical tidbits. Yeah, see, we're going to move very slowly. Going to be very slow. There it is. I finally see it. I wish I could pull up comment. We'll be quiet this year. No need to fearmonger. It's not fearmongering if you're saying be prepared. Part of the reason I want to do a little bit more of an unadulterated podcast to let my feelings out there about fearmongering. Fearmongering, if you want to find that, do a quick YouTube search and you'll come across it very quickly. I'm just speaking reality to you. Anytime we get something in the Gulf, somebody's going to get hit by it. I didn't say Florida. I did say my gut has been telling me since January, February that Florida's month will be October, but you can't really argue with the science. If anything blows up in the Caribbean, somebody's getting hit by it. If anything blows up in the Bay of Campeche, somebody's getting hit by it. It's an old analogy we used to use in the last hurricane season or two. If anything forms in a landlocked area, tropical depression, tropical storm, hurricane, a major hurricane, it could go sideways, upwards, backwards, forwards, zigzagging around. Somebody's going to get hit by it. So if you call that fear-mongering, then, I don't know. I digress. I'm not going to get into that. So when you take a look at your mid-level winds at about 5,000 feet, and you take a look at your trade wind anomalies, we're probably going to see an increase. I haven't really looked at this, but if you look towards after the point, now I'll leave it right here. There's 192 hours out, August 27th. If I can get this to speak to us, I don't think it's going to, but 9 times out of 10, we're probably going to see an increase in our mid-level flow through the Caribbean and through much of the Atlantic as we be outside that favorable MJO phase. And yeah, there you go, right there. You can kind of see a little bit of it already beginning to percolate. Early on in the run here, you can see those shades of red really, we start to see that tapering off, especially closer to home where it matters the most. And I kind of want to see what the 200 millibar winds are doing at that point, if I can get it to cooperate. So yeah, not quite a gyre just yet down there, but it's starting to show the early signals. Ignore that. That's the system that the GFS is trying to force down there, so ignore that. We should probably use something else. We'll use the wind anomaly here at 200 millibars because you need to look aloft to find when it is your surface pressures are going to begin to lift. YouTube's yelling at me again. I apologize if there's any lag in the chat right now. So there you go. There's September 1st. Let's go to the 2nd. If I can get this to cooperate, yeah, there you go. So as we get deeper into September, you can start to see those shades of purple really building in down there, which definitely means we're going to start to see upper level ventilation in the form of rising motions, anticyclonic or clockwise spin out there, which characterizes the gyre. That's what builds up your overall low pressures. Remember, you can kind of see the gyre if you look at 850 and 700, but it's not like it's going to be just a giant hurricane spinning in a cyclonic or counterclockwise spin out there. You kind of have to look for the other little pieces of it. Your ballooning of moisture, your precipitable water values going up. You can usually look at a mean sea level pressure anomaly chart. Let's see the mean sea level pressure anomaly, if I keep garbling my words. And yeah, we're just slowly beginning to see some of the lower pressures begin to build up out there. If you rewind back towards August 29th, August 30th, you can see... we probably shouldn't use the GFS for this, though. Probably shouldn't use the GFS for it because we've got those phantom storms or that 99L Hail Mary out there that's going to dork up the pressures. It's generally in the moistures and your upper level flow that help to designate where the gyre is. And we're kind of still outside of that range here, to tell you the truth. September 4th is still a little early, but one thing I did notice looking at the 200 millibar chart, let me go to 200 to 850 wind shear. This will show your deep layer winds. That concerns me. That definitely concerns me. Truthfully, that is a trash look even for the MDR. Good Lord. Shut down. Look at that enormous tut. Enormous positive vorticity streamer just extending across. If that verifies as we rock into the early portions of September, then the Atlantic is not going to do anything. Atlantic is not going to do anything, but you can see that we have a really nice chunk of relaxed wind shear down there, and this positively tilted trough extending off the eastern seaboard. Obviously, that's going to change. We're looking at 384 hours out, but the general layout I'm saying is positive P&A, so anything that does get going down here will naturally want to lift north because that trough is going to act like a magnet pulling it up. And then as it pulls it north, it's actually going to help to kind of increase its size a little bit too through the trough interaction. So that'll be really, really, really interesting. But that's it. Carol, thank you very much for hitting the subscribe button. It means a lot. Thank you to all of our new subscribers out there who may be watching right now. Key takeaways before we wrap up. I have them written down this time so I can do this in a nice, orderly fashion because as you can see, we were once again in a marathon pace here. Been streaming for a full hour, so excuse me if towards the last 10, 15 minutes I start to stutter a little bit. We went through the Erin graphics. Erin's going to continue to move towards the north. We'll have to watch for a little bit of a westward wobble as it approaches the mid-Atlantic states. We're going to see some pretty rough coastal conditions, but we shouldn't see too many inland impacts outside of maybe an increase in our overall rain coverage that'll help to further exacerbate a little bit of the stuff we see along the coastline. That's really going to depend heavily on how far more towards the left-hand side of our forecast track does Erin meander. On top of that, we didn't get to do a METSAT analysis, but all in all, over the last 3 to 6 hours, we're starting to see that core convection near the center really build back in. It's starting to close itself off again, and it's starting to look a little bit more presentable on satellite imagery again. In fact, let me see if now that I have all of my pages closed, can I pull up a satellite loop of Hurricane Erin without crashing the stream? There you go. So already, it looks like our wind shear is backing off as well, so we might start to see things crank up for the 11 o'clock advisory and then overnight tonight into tomorrow. So, well, there we go. Now the internet is killing us again. On top of that, it looks like our area of interest highlighted for a 1060 over the next low. So, without a shadow of a doubt, there's always that small chance, that marginal chance, it does try to sneak west as a disgusting, ripped apart area of low pressure or vorticity. But as of right now, given what Erin is doing, I'm going to close this because it's starting to lag my live stream again. Thanks to Erin dragging its heels, more than likely we're going to see that middle AOI transition towards the north in Erin's wake. 99L, not likely to do much once it moves into the central and western tropical Atlantic. There are some indications that we'll have to keep at least one eye on over the next 5 or so days that maybe once it sneaks into the Caribbean, it either ejects out into the eastern Pacific and they steal the name, or it may try to lift a little further towards the north and try to do a little something in the western Caribbean or even the Gulf. We'll have to see. Carl's Jr. and Buc-ee's. I low-key miss Carl's Jr., to tell you the truth. Out here we have Hardee's, but they don't have some of the same menu items as Carl's Jr. My buddy Andrew and I out in Arizona, when we'd go to car shows, especially Import Face Off in Tucson, we would always make a stop at Carl's Jr. like 2 minutes from the drag strip. That was like our thing. So to see you say Carl's Jr. and Buc-ee's, gosh, I can go for a run for both. That's for sure. I can go for some Carl's Jr. and a Buc-ee's drink right about now. But alrighty, everybody, I'm going to let y'all go. Thank you to all of my viewers tonight. Let's get those likes up. We had about 400 folks in here just now. We're only at 170 likes. Let's bump those numbers up a little bit, a la Matthew McConaughey. We got to pump those numbers up. If you wouldn't mind, please, it means a lot. The only reason I'm asking for the likes is so we can get this information out there. The more we tickle the algorithm, the more YouTube will put this information in people's faces. Because, gosh, when we have systems out there just kind of twirling around, not doing very much, the clickbait and the misinformation is rampant. Saw somebody over on TikTok saying that Erin would re-intensify into a Category 5 and somehow teleport into the Gulf. 1.7 million people saw that video, that Erin will become a Category 5 again and wipe out the coastline of the Gulf. Now, obviously, I have faith in humanity. And I'm sure about 90% of the people who watched that have their wits about them. But that still leaves 5 to 10% of 1.7 million people, which is anywhere between 50 to 100,000 people who saw that and now think a major hurricane is in the Gulf. So that's why I would really appreciate the likes, and I can't wait to continue to slowly but surely grow this page. So hopefully we become more of a voice of reason during the hurricane season. And for my new subscribers who may be watching right now, obviously I'm not perfect. You all out there as a part of this community motivate me to get that much better. This has been a full learning process since I started in August of 2023. Did 10 years in the United States Air Force as a weather forecaster, continuing on in the Navy, and I'm also a meteorologist local to Central Florida at News 6 WKMG. But I'm always hungry to learn. So if there's anything you recommend, or if there's anything that happens that, could obviously be a learning experience, I'm going to go after it. And so, obviously, yeah, constantly on a learning curve. I got to stay hungry and continue to improve. And you all definitely motivate the heck out of me to do that, for sure. So that's another reason why I love getting that like button nudged. I love having more people join the community because it just inspires me that much more to be that much better. We have a bigger platform. Obviously, there's a higher standard to maintain. Yeah, I'm not even joking. I shared it on my Instagram yesterday evening, and I captioned it on Instagram, clickbait final boss. Clickbait final boss, because, geez, Cat 5, and then it's suddenly going to teleport into the Gulf and hit Texas or Louisiana. But yeah, so have a good night, everybody. April Claremont says, good night, Weather Center, Nazario, and all my friends in the community. That's the great thing about this channel. It's accurate, and we are all friends. We fully agree. And yeah, I don't know why YouTube doesn't really give the notifications anymore. It's such a bummer. And no, not necessarily. A positive PNA does not necessarily warm the Caribbean Sea. There's more to it. Yeah, TikTok is like a whole other beast. That's why I haven't really been posting on there, but maybe I should get back to it. But all right, that's all she wrote. Before I go on for another hour, I'm not going to waste your time. I know some folks out there don't like the open dialogue or the conversation. I personally love it. That's why I'll never stop doing live streams, no matter how much the internet hates me, no matter how much Spectrum tries to charge me more and decrease the internet bandwidth. I need to have a conversation with them. But either way, thank you all for tuning in tonight. I hope you had a great Monday, solid rest of your Tuesday tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow for another over at News 6 at any time. You can also catch me here in the Weather Center, especially during the tropical Atlantic hurricane season. I am a year-round channel, and that's that. I really hope that this evening was very informative. I really do hope that you guys got some really good information from this update. Have plenty more where that came from, and we already have signals to track, not only in the short term, because, things change, but especially digging in to September. So there's a lot more to come. We'll talk to you again very soon, but until next time, you know the phrase. This is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.